Okay, we are live, ready to go. Hi everyone, this is Ramanuj from Lawsico, and I have a very special guest with us today, Srividhya Ragavan, who's the Director of International Programs and a Senior Professor of Law at Texas A&M University School of Law. Now, what is special about Texas A&M is that it's rank 6 IP law school in the United States, and Srividhya Ragavan is a professor of IP law and has played an active part in taking the law school to the heights with respect to IP law. And in case you don't know about it yet, we are doing Lawsico is collaborating with Texas A&M University to bring their online LLM program in India. And the first batch will be starting in August. So by the end of August. And so actually that gives us the opportunity to invite Professor Ragavan to come and share some insights on what is happening in IP law around the world and what are the new opportunities that are coming up and the new trends. And there's so much to learn from her, and we are so glad to have a scholar like her with us. So let's welcome Professor Ragavan.
Hi, Ramanuj. Thank you very much for that very warm welcome. I look forward to this. I look forward to the program.
And there's so much to learn from her, and we're so glad to have. Is there a YouTube open? Somebody has to mute the YouTube. Okay, I think you can continue, please.
Yeah, I look forward to this, and I'm very happy to be a part of the program that we are launching in India. And I'm very glad to be able to meet all of you now.
Great. So, ma'am, let's start about your backstory. You studied law at National Law School, Bangalore, right? Which was the year when you finished your LLB?
Oh, gosh, I feel ancient when I talk about the National Law School, as always. I graduated in, I believe I was the second batch from the National Law School. Oh. So it was 1994. I finished my LLM, I think, in 1995, right? So very, very long time ago.
Very few National Law School alumni has gone on to teach in the US and become a tenured professor. So why don't you tell us a bit about that journey? What happened in between?
Sure. So now I do see a few National Law School alumni, but when I came, I certainly was probably the first or one of the first. I believe I was the first. It was a very different journey. I just joined in the National Law School and enjoyed teaching as a profession, enjoyed being an academic as a profession, the opportunity to interact with students, as well as the opportunity to write about really current and brewing issues was very exciting for me. When I came to the US, I came here as a visiting scholar to the University of Washington at Seattle. And when I came here, I realized that I wanted to do more. So I ended up doing an SJD here. And from there, I went on into the job market and within a year and then became a tenured professor. But it's been a beautiful learning experience of sorts. I started with the University of Oklahoma. It's been a wonderful experience. I've met very distinguished colleagues and what I bring today to as part of the program or as part of being at the Center for Law and Intellectual Property Rights at Texas A&M is all from that experience, which has shaped me and shaped my outlook towards the law.
Great. And, there are many people who are watching today. They have this dream as well. Like they want to at some point go to the US and work there and maybe live there for a few years or maybe even teach. So what is really different about studying in the US or even studying with a US university in a law school compared to studying in India? What's the fundamental difference?
One of the big things I see as a difference is writing skills. I think That's one big difference. The second big difference that I see is the ability to have super strong basics, right? So if their grounding in law is very strong, then it doesn't matter what they want to do later in life, right? So they're able to sort of build over it, right? And finish the required graduate programs and then move on to do whatever their dream job is, right? So to that extent, I feel having strong basics, having the ability to communicate it both orally, but of course in writing as well, are all distinguishing features.
Okay. And so if I'm a mid-career lawyer and I'm already having a I have got my degree in law in India and I'm even practicing here maybe for a few years, and there are many of them are looking for something more in their career and they are doing okay, and but very soon they realize their career is going to plateau, like it'll go in a very similar fashion for the next 10-15 years, and there's no major growth that is ahead of them. And then people think, okay, is doing an LLM going to help me? But there's a catch there. The catch is that most LLMs are very academic programs in nature. Although you said that it's very important that legal theoretical grounding is there, but do you feel, I mean, I think that's one thing that Texas A&M does very differently, that, it's not just a theoretical program, but very practical in nature and focused on professionals getting that value out of that program. But if you can throw some light as to how that can happen in an online LLM program.
Right. So two things I want to, I want to break this question down into different aspects, right? So first of all, I did my LLM in the University of London. I did it in King's College, right? So an LLM is a very important step to graduate beyond law school, right? So, and of course, it's, not just in the sense of getting another degree, right, but also in the sense of being able to, being able to develop that specialized, your skills in a sort of specialized curriculum, be it arbitration, be it intellectual property, whichever area, in trademark or whichever area. So an LLM helps you build over your foundations of the law into foundations of that particular area of law, right? So I believe it's a really important step, right? So in that, I believe an LLM also is a stepping stone. So your second part of the question is, how will LLM help people to get jobs? First of all, if you ask a typical, say, for example, a real estate lawyer, right? Do you do copyright, copyright work for musicians? Or could you talk about cyber squatting or some such thing? Many of them, even here in the US, it's not an area that they deal with on an everyday basis, right? But once they have that grounding, then of course they're more sort of confident to tackle those issues. This LLM, there are two things I want to say about this particular LLM, because I was, in some ways I was closely involved with it. In some ways, I like to think that I was instrumental in starting this with LawSeco, right? So for both, I want to say something, right? So this LLM is distinguished in the sense that usually if you go do an LLM in Australia, you'll do Australian IP law. If you do it in the US, you'll do US IP law, and similarly for UK. This LLM is distinguished in the sense that we actually have 30% of the curriculum for comparative studies. So it's not just, I know Section 3D. It is actually weaving in aspects of local law and showing how local law is distinguished or different, rather, from US law or European law, right? In that, again, there is another distinguished feature. Texas A&M is probably right now the only school. I actually think it's the only school, but being a lawyer, I like to throw in caveats every now and then, right? So it's the only school where you have professors like say, for example, Glenn Lunny, right, who's also going to be on your program, who is, who's a patent agent, who's done his PhD in Stanford in economics and law, etc., an American lawyer, right? And then you have people like Sri Ragavan, you have people like Irene Kalbali, who are all from, Irene Kalbali, of course, is an expert in Europe. Sri and Peter Yu, of course, experts from Asia, India, China, as the cases. So in some way, you see that we have a blend of people who can provide that very sort of unique comparative perspective. And then, of course, this collaboration with LawSeco. Why did we collaborate with LawSeco? Of course, there are many positives, and you wouldn't need me to tell you that. But one of the things I want to highlight is the ability to have somebody in India highlight some of these aspects of right, what the market needs and so on and so forth, and bring in a niche trainer from India to do what is required. So, we've carefully gone over several aspects of it to get to this point. And so I mean, naturally, I very highly recommend this program in saying this.
Yes. So that brings me to the specialization aspect that we are already talking about it. So IP law. Now, why IP law? What do you think is so special about IP law? I have a couple of thoughts on this. One is that, let's say I want to be an international lawyer. What are my choices? Of course, there's a lot of work in international tax law. There's a lot of work in international, even business laws and international trade. There's a lot of work in intellectual property law. What makes IP law stand out for me is that once you have learned IP law in India, you actually already know a lot of US IP law. And this is not magic. This is basically the TRIPS, like the trade related intellectual property related agreements. And these agreements ensure that the principles of, let's say, patent, or it's similar across India or US or South Africa or Australia. Anywhere you go, the fundamentals are same, whether it's trademark or copyright or the kind of contracts eventually get executed influenced by that. Basically, we are dealing with very similar substantive law. Procedural law, of course, can be different, which you need to know. Without knowing that, you will not be an international IP lawyer. You have to learn the procedural aspects. You also have to learn the very special jurisprudence in different jurisdictions that may have evolved over time. But beyond that, it's like you are going with something. So if you're a lawyer who's either studied IP law in India in your college, which you have, if you are an Indian lawyer, or from anywhere for that matter, everybody gets a basics in IP law, and that basics really serves. You're not starting from zero. If you start in, let's say, US real estate law or US corporate law, you will be starting from basement, not even from the ground floor. And we can say that if you're starting in IP law, you're starting at the second floor, and okay, that gives you a foundation, right? And not only that, if you're practicing IP law in India, the experience is probably a lot more transferable, whether you are going to work in UK or Canada or US, anywhere for that matter, in Dubai for that matter. A lot of that is transferable. The way you will be drafting, let's say, a IP licensing agreement, or maybe if you're drafting a film distribution agreement or a music distribution agreement, I guess 80-90% of will be very similar. You do need 10% specialized local knowledge, and that is the opportunity. So if you are already doing, and basically if you're, it just so integrated. The IP law, unlike many other areas of practice, is globally integrated, and you will see a lot of Indian law firms working with US law firms, US law firms sending work to Indian law firms, and this happens in this area than anything else, I feel. So would love to know your thoughts on this, and why, like, what makes you feel that IP law is so good for lawyers who want to be international lawyers?
So yes, I agree with most of it. I think in just IP law today is much more global than other areas of law. There are other areas of law which are equally global. I don't mean to say that IP is the only area, but certainly IP is more global, right? IP also has the distinguished feature of, you could make IP your bread butter practice, right? You could be a patent agent, patent litigator, patent prosecutor, or you could make IP the fries on the side of your food, right? So you could be a corporate lawyer who only does trademark prosecution on the side when you're, for your companies, or managing a trademark portfolio for a big multinational corporation, right? You are right in saying that, yes, if you've studied IP law basically in India, then yes, you do have some grounding, and you have a grounding not just in IP law, but also a little bit in trade law, right? What is TRIPS and how does the TRIPS agreement impact, and so on and so forth. But getting to know the comparative perspective is really gives you I don't want to say a little bit of an edge, because it gives you a lot of edge, right? In working with other jurisdictions, be it Europe, be it the US, right? Because it's, while some basics are the same, US MPEP is vastly different. US prosecution procedures are vastly different. But knowing these tools exist in the US, and knowing that a different set of tools exist in Europe, helps you when you first get, say, a European client or an American client, to pick the right tools. And in doing so, you're actually saving time, right? If I have to figure all of this out myself, it's going to take me maybe a month, right? No client is waiting for you to educate yourself on all of these things. But if you know, oh, I remember in that class, Professor so-and-so told me that this document, CFR, talks about it, right? So then you go to the Code of Federal Regulations, and then you say, let me look through the CFR. Even if it's not something that you have learned about in class, you will know, look, it's not enough I look at the patent statute. It's not enough I look at the manual for patent examination procedures, which are the two things you look at in India. I also have to look at the CFR for certain things, right? So you will know where to look at for what. That, I think, makes this type of degrees much more, it's important to get that knowledge trajectory that you probably don't otherwise.
Right. And also US IP law, US is the world's IP capital in a way. Like US has actually the IP regime we have in the world today has been in a many ways in a way championed by the United States, and they are very vigilant about creating the IP regime across the world. And today, any US being a very important market, any startup, any deep tech company, anybody who's creating an innovation or even a trademark or a copyrighted product, they would look at the US market and they would definitely register the IP there. And do you think that creates some kind of opportunity for global lawyers?
So absolutely, yes. There are two things I want to say. One, as somebody who has seen all of these jurisdictions, right? Europe, UK, US, as well as India. Yes, in some ways, America serves as the fulcrum. And so being able to understand American law is very, very helpful. But it's also important to understand, and this I say as a scholar, right? Opportunities in the future lies on the side of Asia, right? Asia is the market, right? So in a lot of ways, we, and by we, I'm not talking about Americans or Indians, but generally global scholars have looked for scholars from Asia to show us the distinguishing features of each market. Right? I mean, what we say about, for example, pharmaceutical patents in the US will not apply for India, right? But we need scholars who will come, and there are a few now who are doing a fantastic job. But the idea is to create more scholars who would do that, right? So, if scholars in the US or if employers in the US like to feed into Pfizer, we need people who know patent law, the comparative aspects, etc., to feed into, say, Mylan, to feed into, these kind of companies that work in more than one jurisdiction, right? So those are Sun Pharmaceuticals, etc., and so on, right? So it's important to get that comparative edge. I think that's the next next step, the comparative edge in each of these things. And that's what we hope to bring through this program.
What is your thought on what are the emerging trends in IP law right now? What is shaping the world? Like IP is shaping the world. So what are the few things that are making a huge difference right now?
So IP, in a lot of ways, post-COVID, IP has become, the fulcrum both to consider things to do as well as to consider things that we don't do, right? So if you take patents post-COVID, the question of how do we help innovation while also enabling medication, access to medication, right? If you consider things like copyright, trade secrets, these were all taking a kind of a backstage at one point in time, but all of this is right in the middle of access to knowledge, access to meds, and so on and so forth. So IP has become the central for discussion on environment. It's the central tenet for discussions on climate change, environment, innovation, healthcare. So in some ways, knowing IP law is important. Whether you work in any, it doesn't matter which area of law you're working in, IP law has become important to understand how one can continue to innovate while also continue to make the globe more sort of integrated.
Right. And what do you feel about, there is a lot of startups, obviously, like, we say that there's a fourth industrial revolution, we are in the middle of it. And during the agricultural revolution, obviously, like, there was the age of agriculture where in the Middle Ages, when the vehicle of wealth creation was the land, and then it was factories, and then it was like today, then it was, at some point people said it's data, but today it's very clear that startups are the vehicles of wealth creation around the world, and India is playing a very important role in this. How do you see all of this fueling IP law?
So IP plays a very important role, and you're absolutely right. You call it as startups as the basics for the fulcrum for wealth creation. I like to think it's really innovation and intellectual property, all right, or rather intangible property, right? So in the 90s, the globe discovered that intangible property can fuel more innovation than even tangible property like real estate and so on and so forth, right? So if you look at India is in a very, very unique position, not just in terms of innovation, but in terms of several things, right? In data, in startups, in privacy, Bollywood with its creativity, right? And then, of course, there are these regional filmmakers who are, I can think of so many regional films which have, improved creativity and which have contributed to the creative exercise, like Bahubali and so on. And so recently, some of the other big blockbusters from Southern India, right? So different, industries in India are now coming to the forefront, right? And as they come to the forefront, they have to have enough regulations and laws. So you need people who are first policymakers who can create policies, practitioners who can practice in this area, academics who can teach in this area, and then, of course, global sort of leaders who can go to other countries and then disseminate to the world what India is doing, whether they stay in India or go outside of India. So to that extent, having this knowledge, will be helpful to keep up with, with the technological developments and to the general climate that we see in business in India, right? So if I can just take a moment to say this, right? I as you said, I'm a student of National Law School. Dr. Mitra, who was my teacher, NL Mitra, used to say,
also, by the way.
He was yours too, but yeah, that's awesome. He's my mentor. I absolutely love him. He used to say law is like a Hindu wife to technology, always 7 steps behind, right? So the goal of these programs, right, it doesn't, even now, it doesn't really put it on an equal footing, but to at least reduce the number of steps, right, to keep up with technology.
Okay. And when you look at IP, and a lot of people want to do take law, like they want to specialize in take law. What do you think about that? Do you think IP is a right? Like, what is more opportunity, IP or take? How do you see those things kind of
I mean,
integrated?
these are all very sort of integrated. I mean, with tech comes trade secrecy, privacy, internet laws. Internet laws, of course, a strong grounding in IP, contracts, and all of these things. So there is a strong grounding to tech law from IP. In fact, I can tell you in Texas A&M, for our JD property law, real estate property law class, one of my friends teaches property, and he always invites one of us, the IP faculty, to give a 1 hour lecture on property rights, right? So it's always the case that we get, we introduce intangible property. Now, privacy law is another aspect of IP law. It's become big enough, data privacy, data, big data, etc., that today we spin it out as a separate area. Law and technology has become a separate area by itself. But, much of the grounding comes from basic IP as well as basic contracts. So, learning IP would help you to grow from there.
Great. So if I have interest in tech companies and working with them, IP is a fantastic area to choose.
I won't say it's fantastic. I would say it's an absolute must. And I would also add that the kind of grounding we give in India, while important, right, and great, I don't mean to say is any less, needs a little more sort of next level of education for that, right? Whether in India or in the US or UK, that's different. I'm not saying that any institution is more or less, but I do think that one has to have the building blocks beyond what we do in JD. We say this to our JD students, so I want to say this to our LLB students as well, right? That you need that additional grounding, be it in writing, be it acquiring the ability to find the nuances of different issues, right? Be it the ability to be a prosecutor versus a litigator versus, doing something very, or staying in a very sort of specialized practice, right? Say PTAB practice or Indian Patent Office sort of practice or PCT work or whatever it is. You need that additional grounding to have that repertoire of tools that is required.
You work with almost all top law firms in India. You have friends there and you work closely with them, as I know. So would you like to talk about that? Like, there's a huge demand for US legal skills in Indian law firms, specifically in IP law. Unlike, I can't think of any other area of law where there's that much demand for international skills. But also, like, I know that a lot of US law firms are closely working with Indian law firms. And in fact, today, if you walk into many US law firms in New York or Boston, they would say that we have 3 options for you, that all the work will be done by a lawyer in the US, or part of the work will be done by a US lawyer with an Indian lawyer, or we'll give all the work to an Indian lawyer and we'll ensure the quality is right. And that's an option for global clients. So how is this international IP law fraternity and the market developing? If you can throw some lights, any anecdotes, any experiences, any thoughts?
Sure. So, first of all, you're right. I connect with a lot of IP lawyers in India as well as in the US, right? Many issues today are global. Very rarely, in fact, people call me I have different avatars. They call me an IP expert in some places, but in many places they call me as an India expert who also works in US IP, right? And in other places they call me a trade expert. Part of the reason is because there are tech companies that are based out of India, like Wipro or Infosys, and I worked with both places, right, in different capacities, right, which has a strong basis in the US, right? Same with Biocon, same with Bharat Biotech, right? So these are all companies with a strong ground, strong presence in the US, right? And so they need lawyers, right, who know both systems, right? And I can tell you off the bat that I know only American law lawyer does not work. And I can tell you, I know only Indian law lawyer also does not work. You need somebody who's versatile, who can say, oh, this will be easier in India. This will be so much more difficult in India, because in India, this will get caught under Section 3D or 3E or something like that, right? It's just an example that comes to mind, right? Similarly, I mean, I live in Texas. Texas is the highest Indian American investments in the US, right? Now, the number of Indian entrepreneurs that I meet, right? And when I say Indian entrepreneurs, people who have an office in India with employees, I meet them on an everyday basis. I can tell you that much, right? There is a separate organization. It used to be one Indian American chamber. Now there is a Tamil Indian American chamber, Telugu Indian, because with every state comes these entrepreneurs. Every state law has become important, right? And I want to say these are fun stories, and I'm sure your audience would love to listen, right? So yesterday I had a student call me, right? And she's one of my dear students from India, did education in India, but did the JD here in the US, and doing well in the US. And said, you know what, I want to start an Indian, I want to take my firm with, a branch in India. And this is a big mid-sized law firm, right? So we're not talking like 2 or 3 people starting a law firm. This is a big mid-sized law firm wanting to go into India, and therefore want to enroll in a program that teaches Indian law as well. And so wants to do a program, because wants that additional edge, right? And so when we were talking, the student said, Professor, all of the Indian lawyers have an edge because they know American law. But suddenly I feel like we don't know Indian law at all. And so it's important to have that edge, right? So keep that in mind. It's very, very important as we go on to have that additional edge to do well.
A lot of people have requested me to ask you this question, that if I am a law graduate in India, maybe I'm working for a couple of years, maybe a little more, maybe 4 or 5 years, and I want to find a path to go to the US and work there as a lawyer. How can that happen? Can that happen through an online LLM program? Can it be helpful? Or should I do an LLM physically in the US? If I do an LLM physically in the US, of course, there is a cost aspect. The cost is very high. Many people cannot afford it. But if you can throw some light on this, like what could be a workable plan for somebody who wants to go to the US and work there? US is a country of migrants, built by migrants, so immigrants, right? So can a sharp Indian lawyer have an opportunity, and how do they plan to immigrate into the US?
Sure. So, any move from any country to another country really is very sort of individual based, right? In a lot of ways, when I moved from India to the US, you didn't see very many Indian lawyers, right? But I see quite a few of them now, be it academia, be it law firms, right? I see quite a few engineer turned lawyers too now. One of my dear friends is also an engineer turned lawyer, right? And I see several of them now. It's not a unique beast anymore. It used to be somebody unique, right? So much of the answer to the question depends on the person, right? But as far as LLM in person versus online LLM, the online LLM, especially the one that we are now focusing on India, right? First of all, is the most cost effective LLM that, because I know this because I fought for this, right? So the cost was, and I know you know this as well,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
The cost was one of the biggest fights we have had to launch this program, right? So it comes at less than half the price in terms of its ticket price, right? And then comes the cost of living in the US, right? So the cost of living in the US, adjusting in the US, all of that is, so the ticket price you pay is the price for the degree. Whereas if you come to the US, obviously there is the living cost, the transportation, your food, etc., plus the fact that you may not be able to keep your job during that time. So you really must keep that in mind when you do these things, right? So that is one important aspect that you have to
And I think
remember.
the living cost, depending on the city, could be something
Oh,
between
absolutely. There
$3,000.
is no doubt. I mean, if you live in New York City, you're living three lives, right, at the same time, right? Versus you're living in some other city. Each city is different, so I don't want to compare. But I'm just giving you an example, right? So that's absolutely true as well. And then, of course, each city has its own flavor. In some cities, you will find Indian Americans who will help you, but in some cities, you're likely to feel very sort of lonely and left out. That's one. And I can tell you, I did my SJD in DC. DC has a lot of Indians. DC is very robust, but oh my God, the cold used to kill me. The winter was, I used to dread the winter, right? And I don't think even now I'm acclimatized to the winter. So there are other hurdles you have to cross. Personally, I think it's easier to cross those hurdles if you have a job, because then you're able to afford some of the things that you cannot otherwise, right? When you have a job. So I do think those hurdles become easier to cross, right? So you have a fancy pair of shoes, you have a nicer car, those kind of things help you, right? And then you don't worry about cranking the heater up to 98 degrees, and then so it's a little bit easier. But going back to the question of how can somebody who is working in India be employed here, right? It depends on the type of job you want, whether you want to be an academic, whether you want to be, work in a law firm, or whether you want to create your own law firm, right? And it depends on what each of that industry is looking for. And don't rule out the possibility of being an entrepreneur. I mean, that's the biggest niche that you have as an Indian today, right? If not an entrepreneur with the base, one of my juniors from NLS did that, started a company in Kerala and relocated because the company grew to California. So there are, there are ways in which you can achieve your dream, right? So, so I wouldn't limit myself to one thing, but how you do that is is ultimately with each one of us, right? And whether you do it, and for that, I can tell you there is a very, very simple answer. Many, many people are doing it. It ain't rocket science. People are doing it. You just have to figure out what is required and if anything is required, and then do it. When I came here, I wanted to be an academic. I realized I had to write a strong paper. I took my time. It took me a year, but I did that and published it well. So, each area requires its own set of, these are the goalposts, and you have to hit those goalposts to get to your,
But it is a
Ramanuj knows he wanted a US law school to collaborate with, and his goalpost was very, very different, right? Ramanuj, I mean, would you
yes,
agree with
of course.
me?
That's a good
And
point. Yes.
he learned so many skills that are, very different. But that learning experience, and now he's got a goal. We chose Law Seco from after considering various other places. So it's your ability to appreciate those goalposts. And then using your skills to hit them, right? To hit well, hit is the wrong word, to score the goal, right? So that's what I would say. Sorry, Ramanoj.
So, in India, a lot of people feel that even if you're very smart, even if you're deserving, sometimes your opportunities are restricted by circumstances. And there is no doubt, like in India, the legal market is kind of small, like it's $2 billion. Today, even a startup can be worth $1 billion, right? Or more, like 10, $20 billion. But comparatively, the legal market is just small. And a whole lot of people don't have the kind of opportunities they want. The number of opportunities are very restricted. Now, US is a very different situation. It's a $330 billion market. And in fact, there are 2 lakh law firms, 200,000 law firms, which are small law firms, 2 to 10 people, right? It's unthinkable in India. Like we don't have that many law firms. Simply, we don't have. Now, only question people see the opportunity, but what they ask themselves is that why will they hire me? I'm an Indian LLM. Why would somebody in the US hire me? What opportunity will I get? And if you can, I believe personally the answer is that the entire foundation of United States is meritocracy, right? People who have ideas, who have ability, who have skills, come up the ladder and do really well simply because there's such a demand for those skills. So maybe you can share some.
Yeah, I just wanted to write that down so I don't forget. No, it's a great question, and I think that's where the difference is. Most people ask, why will they hire me? And I think that's the wrong question. The question is, what can I do to make myself hireable in the market? Right? Because most people don't want to do the extra steps. And that includes a lot of very, very smart people. I mean, most people think, my cousin did this and I want to do that. But most people forget your cousin did that to get that job. You're not trying to get your cousin's job. You're trying to get another job that you want. And so you have to figure out, what can I do, or what is required to get, the job I want. I also see another big difference, right? When people, and this is why I think people need the LLM as well. There are, there is a type, I don't want to say all Indian students, but I see several Indian students, right? And so when sometimes I ask them, what do you want? Ma'am, I want a job. It doesn't work like that. You need to have clarity. And if law school has not given you that clarity, maybe the master's program is the place where you'll get that clarity. You want to be able to say, I want to do this. I would not want to be a prosecutor. I have litigation skills, or I don't want to be in a law firm. I'm not a political beast, but by nature, I love research. And so I want to be a researcher in this way, or I want to work for an international organization because I want to work in the policy space, right? So, and I see that clarity really missing amidst a lot of students. And I'm not saying Americans have that clarity always, but I always find that, at least for a lot of international students, not just Indian international, but typically international students, doing that extra degree gives them the ability to have that, to have that clarity. The third thing that I see sometimes is missing is the lethargy to do the things that you have to do. So let me only give you an example from my life, okay? So I did my law degree from NLS, and then went to King's College. I did well, and I got a scholarship and all that. So I did well. So I came back. I worked at Wipro. I worked at Titan. So I had, a chip on my shoulder, right? So I come to the US, and I know. Then I knew exactly where I wanted to be. So I tried to write a paper, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm an NLS grad. I can cook a paper like that. And I sent a paper, and one of my mentors looked at it and said, this is complete trash. Have you even read it? Go back, read it carefully, and come back. And then I must have worked on like 25 drafts. And much of it not just my writing skills, and then my thinking skills as well. So, and then of course, I become a professor, spend 16 years at OU, come back to Texas A&M, spend 4 years, and we have a new dean. Okay. And then I send an email, right, to send a bunch of things to somebody else. And I send the email and I say, look, this is the email that I want to send. And the email comes with red line corrections on my English. And I'm like, excuse me, I've been in this business for 16 years. And I get a reply, I don't care. These are the things I would correct. And I'm like, no. And I got a yes way. These are things that will get corrected, right? And it goes on. So, life is like that. It's constant learning. And if you're lethargic, and of course, we do that to our students. I don't care if the student graduated 20 years back. If the student didn't write well, the number of emails from Ramanuj I correct now is just, it's just amazing. And sometimes Ramanuj is like, ma'am, it's okay. I'm like, no, it's not. He sometimes even jokes. He says, ma'am, I'm not your student. I don't care. I'm going to correct your email. But life is an learning experience. And Indian students who are there, who want a job, sometimes think the degree is the end all. It is not. If you publish, you want to publish in bigger publications. If you publish in bigger publications, you want to have better thoughts. So it's the quality keeps on improving. And, it's same with a law firm. You have a client, you want better client. You serve better clients, you want more sort of clients. You're working for Bezos, you want to now work for Bezos and Musk, right? So for each, you have to adapt yourself and learn more. There is only one trick to this whole business. That's your ability to learn more and constantly, right? And to always feel uncomfortable where you are, right? Oh, I'm great where I am, but I have to learn this, right? And that's a trait you're going to have to carry to your grave, unfortunately, right? So that is how you set yourself up for success, whether it's in a law job or some other job. And Indians are doing it. I see so many Indians. I see some young Indian NLS graduates who are doing so well because they're just not happy where they are. So I think that's something you have to keep in mind all the time. Sorry, it's a very long answer.
No, that's great. That's very insightful. I have one question though. Like, you mentioned some areas of work for IP lawyers. So let's say somebody does this course or even they learn IP law. What are the three most high demand areas of work for IP lawyers right now?
So there is no most high demand. It really depends on the type of work you do and you're doing. And it depends on which area of law you're working in, right? So if you're in patents, I know a lot of people like to prosecute. These are people who don't want to, they just like the idea of prosecuting and doing things. There are people who like to do government jobs, so they want to become a patent agent, right? And then, of course, there are people who like to do trademarks and, defend trademarks, create new trade dresses, and then move slowly to the corporate side and be a branding expert, right? And very recently, I have come across a lot of these trademarks, original trademarks people have this new avatar getting into sports law in the US because NCAA has, in some ways it has approved some of the college athletes to get name, image, likeness sponsorship. So many of them now have this new avatar of becoming, sports, dabbling into sports law and so on and so forth. Copyright, Bollywood, you're bored with Bollywood, Hollywood, Collywood, I don't know. I mean, you're bored with all of that. Go to Nigeria, you've got Nollywood these days. So, opportunities are plenty, right? And this is just in a market. Of course, there are global markets, right? I mean, somebody like Priyanka Chopra has 1 foot here and 1 foot in India. And now that's true with so many of the Indian actors and actresses as well. So there is no 1, 2, or 3, right? I have a student who graduated from Oklahoma, and and wanted to be an entertainment lawyer. And I said, you should go to LA. And no, I don't want to be a big time entertainment lawyer. I wanted to go to Nashville. And I said, Nashville? He goes to Nashville, exclusive film festival, music festivals, works only with musicians who are small and medium musicians, medium time musicians, and does very, very well. I don't think I can get an appointment that easily with that person. I know somebody in Indiana who does exclusive work, okay, and you should get this, only with dead clients, does not like living people. So decided to launch into dead people, not my student. I can't take credit for that person, but one of my, whoever that is my favorite, because oh my God, I don't like humanity. I'm dealing with dead people. Has a fantastic business. Michael Jackson's posthumous rights, Marilyn Monroe's posthumous rights, that itself sets you up for the next generation, right? And then all the music rights of some of the musicians who are of Prince too, I think goes with the same person. So they're based out of Indiana, which is nowhere, right? Not really. I don't want Indiana lawyers to tell me, Sri, you said this, but not really. But it's not like New York City or California, but does fantastically well and has a very sort of unique practice. So again, goes back to, knowing these things exist, doing those type of laws that gives you the knowledge that, look, this is a niche area. This is where I'm going to tent. And this is where I am going to start something, and figuring out where you will do well. I love how this person thought, I hate humanity, but I'm going to deal with dead clients because I'm a great lawyer, right? So, and that's not wrong, right? So, be aware. It's to use your education for your benefit is what it is.
So we have thought of this, and we have seen people doing this already, and this is what I want to run by you, and I want your thought on this. So imagine that there's a lawyer in India who has some experience, maybe not even in IP law, maybe in litigation or something, and now they see an opportunity to specialize and want to work in the US. I think what makes more sense than just landing up in US to do an LLM program, which some people can do, but where I see a lot more value is that you learn US laws. LawSico provides you with a California bar exam and even other bar exam programs in solicitor qualification exam or Canadian bar exams, Ontario or NCA exams. Now that what happens is that where you want to go, you can prepare yourself. You learned US IP law, you specialized, you have a degree from the right school, followed by you can even start by doing paralegal work, or you can connect yourself with some law firms where you get to do some of the US work. So you start building track record. And at that time, I will not worry about how much you're getting paid. It's really about having those initial 3, 4, 5, 6 assignments, which shows that you have done this before. This is not you're not saying just give me an opportunity. You actually have done some work. And so it's a combination of your degree, which really helps to create credibility and trust and familiarity with somebody who's looking to hire an international lawyer. Secondly, you have international credentials by clearing the bar exams, and you have a track record. That if you have these three things, there's only one thing now left, which is your outreach. What I think is very much possible is that somebody can do this from any country. They don't have to be in the US to do this. And while they're doing this, I have students who have started earning like $2,000-3,000 per month by doing that work. And it is happening already. One of my students have been told by an US employer that we want you to come down to the US. And they're ready to, in fact, sponsor her visa to come and work there because you have proven yourself. That is one way. The other way is that you are simply having clients. You can become an US attorney sitting in India. It's possible today because of the very liberal structures. It is possible. And once you do, okay, you have to go to the US to give the exam. But other than that, you can do everything else sitting in India. And once you're an US attorney, if you have, and by the way, unlike India, in the US, you can do advertising. You can even like find work in many different ways. and it's a very large market. So once you have clients and you are earning enough, it is no challenge. You can, if you show that you are earning already in the US, getting a visa is not so difficult to get for business purposes and so on. So I think
Two
that,
things I want to, sorry.
yeah, so it feels like a more realistic way to get a job in the USA and immigrate, and over time like build that. It gives you a lot of time and stability, and you can do it a lot more confidently versus you have 1 year in the US to prove yourself, and you have to do well in your class, in your LLM program.
No, it is very hard. I
You
know.
have to adjust to the new place. You have to do internships at the same time. You have to network at the same time, and you are on a clock. If you can't do it if you fall sick, it's over. If you get depressed, it's over, right? You can't, like, you are just on that clock that somehow you're
So,
working.
yeah. No, I want to say something here. Sorry if I cut in, but
No, it's for you.
I didn't want to forget the point. So 2 or 3 things here, right? One of my very dear friends from NLS came here, did the LLM, got a job, did well. Few years later, decided, you know what, I am going to go back to India and then start my law firm because here in that law firm, it was a big law firm, that person was an associate, right? I mean, you're a sort of associate working,
Cog in the wheel, basically.
and then you do the, you're growing. Whereas now it's a very, very hip law firm in South India, right? And I hear about the firm sitting here. And of course, this is the law firm that this person has started. And so this person runs the law firm, right? And so controls so many things, and probably is much more connected than even I am sitting in India, because they do some of the very sort of sophisticated work from here, and so is very well connected, right? So keep that in mind. There is no one path for anyone, right? Same with Ramanuj. If I can indulge Ramanuj, have you been to the US in your life?
Not yet.
Not yet, right? If I go and if I went to College Station, and if I get told in College Station, even 2 years back, look, we have to do a program, but I really want an Indian person based out of New Delhi, most of them would say, excuse me, right? And especially most of them would think that's an absolute no. They would think, oh my God, Indian laws, that sounds like impossible, right? When I spoke with Ramanuj, and when I'd asked Ramanuj for something and we had talked, and if at that time Ramanuj had said, can I do this with your university? I'm like, are you kidding me? It's a 5,000-acre university. We are the top 6 in the country, right? And we have like 7 IP professors. Our Center for IP is so great, right? Are you kidding me? There is no way we'll even filter out somebody in the US without a year of filtering process, right? But he asked, not in the first conversation. He waited and waited and waited, and he asked, right? And then when he asked, I said, and this is actually a great story, because when I think about it, I just find it impossible, right? So, and then my boss, the dean, was coming to India, and I said, you know what? I'll get you 30 minutes. It's your 30 minutes. And then don't ask me if things don't go well. At the end of 30 minutes, then, we're talking, and I said, what do you think? And the dean goes, but maybe we'll give it a try. Okay. So we give it a try, and we say, okay, we'll go through. Maybe a year and a half later, we call Ramanujan and said, I don't think it's working. I'm really sorry. You're great. I don't think it's working. Maybe we should do something else later in life. I don't think they even realize what India is. So sorry. All of us said sorry. Is that right or not, Ramanujan?
That's true.
Then 2 months later, something else happened, and I call and I say, you know what, I am going to go to College Station, right? And so we go to College Station, the dean and I go to College Station, and then we talk to them about India, and something else happened, and they said, maybe we'll look at it, no promises. And then after about 6 months, we are like, okay, Ramanuj, we're back in the table. And he's like, are you guys out of your minds? You say goodbye and then you're back in the table. And so then I call him separately and I say, I don't need you to say this. Back in the table, call yourself back to the table. Let's talk. And then here we are. We are
It
trying
took a
now.
very long time. Yes, this
It
took
took a
more than
very long
2 years
time.
of like, yes,
Yeah,
quality
and
time
I
trying.
can vouch that I spoke with people who are like, India. Why India? I mean, Europe is there. They speak this and they do this. And so we were like, it is India. Unfortunately, that's the future, right? And so, I mean, that is life. Sometimes it's how you persist, how you are able to stay the course, how you find the right partner, and how you go through the road, right? So, and he's never come to the US, right? It's never been, Ramanaj signed the agreement from New Delhi, and and when we started this the second time, I want to say, people said, oh, should we go to New Delhi or will they come here? And we said, neither. They're going to sign and you're going to sign. Maybe you can see each other in Zoom if you want to. Finally, they didn't even do that, right? So
Right.
that's life.
Yeah.
And he's working for the largest university now, in some ways, collaborating rather, in the US. And we are very proud to work with LawSeco as well. So, life is globalized. What can I say? And I'm glad it's
Absolutely. Yeah, I
globalized.
have been really like in the entire process. It was a big learning experience for me, and there was we worked with so many people with so many different perspectives, and I feel very proud that the kind of opportunity we are being able to offer to people in India today and lawyers. This something like this didn't exist, and we are in such a new category. It's like when something new has come, you haven't seen anything like this before, and like, what is this? Like, how is this even possible? But that's how this program is. Like, if you research into US online LLMs, you will find this to be out of the world for anybody, right? So with
Oh,
that,
absolutely. I have no doubt. LSAC has called me, and LSAC has said, can we do this with LSAC? Because this is a very unique program. And Texas A&M and Ramanaj, you don't know, this is a small thing, but I just want to say, they have now call me the advanced champion. It's like advancing diversity and whatever champion. I'm like, really? Do you know how much I had to fight to create the program? So sometimes it's really just persistent. And I'm like,
people probably
I'm
don't know
glad to
what
be
is
diversity
LSAT.
advanced champion. It's very, very dear to me, but that's different. It
Yeah.
takes a lot to do
Can
that.
you
And
explain what is LSAC? Because most people wouldn't know.
oh, the law school admissions council. They have a presence in India as well. They have a humongous presence in the US.
They are the
They
ones who
have
hold LSAT, right? The exam LSAT is organized by them.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So their presence in the US is to organize these, LSAC exams. You cannot get admission into the US law schools unless you do the LSAC exam. And, so it's like the GRE, but for law schools, it's a must. You don't get it otherwise. But for in India, I know Jindal and a couple of other schools actually use LSAC exams. They want a bigger presence in India. And so they like doing programs like this. They've been very happy with this program. And I can tell you several universities have noticed this program. And several universities, it's very, very nascent. We got a little bit delayed to launch it for no fault of LawSeco, entirely because of, in some ways, A&M, I think, and it's not anybody's fault, really. It's how the process was. And so as we went through that, several universities, once we launched it, have shown interest in this program.
Yeah, and I think, it speaks about the future that we have ahead of us, that, global universities are taking an interest in India. It's a moment of pride for all of us. So, yeah.
Sorry, not just that, this has been a big fight to get this type of grant, this type of fee, this type of ticket price now. But as this program grows, I know that Texas A&M will look to, to make it little more global, and I know they will make it a little more. The ticket price won't stay the same. That's for sure. I can assure that because it's
Yes.
happened with our other MJOB
Over
programs.
time, the
So,
price would increase and be very different.
yeah.
We are already 8 minutes past time, and we are enjoying the conversation so much. Let's just see if there's one question we can take from anybody has the question. There's a question about if I'm a recent law graduate, will this LLM help me to move to the US? I am working with a US Texas firm already, thanks to Law School. Our student, he's already, while he was a law student, he got a job with a Texas law firm remotely. And now he's looking forward to doing this program possibly. So do you think, how can this help him?
So absolutely. I mean, if you're already working for a Texas-based law firm, then you're certainly going to grow better. You're certainly going to know more of US laws. But I can tell you, it doesn't mean that you walk in and you get a job. You have to do what is required. That may be the bar exam, that may be some other certification, additional courses, whatever it is you need.
Building track record more than certification.
Yeah, and those kind of things.
I would like to think that this LLM would be enough certification for them, at least for the next few years. I would hope that at least for the next few years, this LLM will be enough certification.
I'm hoping too, right? But certainly LLM, I just had an LLM student who wrote the bar from India and who has got a job and all that. So I do believe that it'll be it will be a great opportunity.
It actually is much easier than it looks because we are seeing so many people doing it, which gives us the confidence.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, you certainly have an edge between somebody who doesn't have any of that and someone who has this additional edge. You become an Aggie. Texas A&M. I mean, we are the home of the 12th man, right? And that's like, how do I say, like the cricket team, right? Our football team is, it has huge reputation. And so I don't know if you've seen pictures. We're always standing like this and saying Gigam and Aggies, and getting the Aggie ring is even for I don't have the Aggie ring, for instance, because you have to study. And I've tried. I'm like, look, guys, can I have the Aggie ring? And they said, no. I mean, you can graduate from Harvard and you can't get the Aggie ring. Actually, Glenn has the Aggie ring because he did his, I think it's a master's or something in Texas A&M. And he'll tell you about the Aggie ring. Any meeting, Glenn wears the Aggie ring and he'll show off. And we are like, okay, right? And if you go to College Station, I tell you, it's like maroon. It's like the whole town is wearing maroon, right? And somebody, when I first joined, somebody said, oh, Shri, all of us bleed maroon. I'm like, what? No. And nowadays, of course, we say very proudly, we all bleed maroon. I mean, that's how much the brand has a reputation.
It's an emotion, right? It's not just a university, it's like an emotion. And that it's very rare. And
yeah. Every faculty meeting, we bleed maroon. Whatever.
Great. Thank you so much, ma'am. I think it's time to wrap up. I really appreciate you giving time for this. I know you're very busy, and please take care, and looking forward to seeing you in the live class when we have the classes and students will be connecting. Thank you very much.
I look forward to seeing at least some of these students in my class. I'm going to be teaching one of these classes, and I would absolutely love it if some of them are in my class. Right? Great. So thank you very much, Ramanuj. Thanks for the opportunity to engage with people. I absolutely enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.